Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be showing off the new archetype in action, the Abysses. We're going to show off a lot of different builds. So if you guys are interested in this archetype, make sure you guys watch the entirety of this video, as there's going to be some really important big brain plays that are going to be from completely different duels from different players and different matchups and stuff. Because I think the archetype actually has a lot of potential if you mix it in. Just playing the deck vanilla is probably not going to do you any good because there's just not enough extensions in the deck itself to open up with a bunch of different negates realistically. The reason why I say realistically is because I'm going to actually explain some things real quick here, but the reason why is because it doesn't actually let you, like, to tribute like 5 of your like monsters to get out the entirety boss monster setup is not really consistent for the archetype. But what is consistent is being able to get the effect of your cards by just throwing them into the graveyard. So that's what the archetype's all about. So Droplet, getting rid of double Light Serpent just gives you free Light Serpent to be summoned, and we stopped the Dark Dragoon, and this card basically is a Snatch Steal. This is new Magista stuff that we actually haven't shown off yet, but this is also a card that doesn't need to be negated, as well as it will Snatch Steal monster and negate its effect. But the Echidna over here is a very important part of the archetype, and I'll give you guys one brief explanation for some of the combos in the deck, and then I'm just gonna let things play out, but I have to explain certain things. So this card lets you make something have a 0 attack on your opponent's board, but on top of that, during your main phase, if they happen to have something with 0 attack, you get to add reptile monsters with different names from your deck to your hand up to the number of monsters your opponent controls with 0 attack. You could potentially search up, technically, 6 cards off of this. Now, it's more realistically to get like 2 or 3, but there's a really cool combo that you can probably get like 4 cards off of it, and on top of that, you can potentially search out 4 cards and draw 4 cards. It's an absolutely insane play, but at the end of the day for the archetype, you usually just throw everything in the graveyard and just set up. But he's going to go ahead and search out whatever he needs for the combo pieces. Lair of Darkness is also a really good card. So how the whole entire archetype works is all of them will have some type of pretty much getting a graveyard effect to get some additional way to summon it, or getting your opponent to summon something off of their graveyard. So Curse is really important. It just lets you tribute a monster to special summon this card. If you happen to use Lair of Darkness, heck, you can just tribute your opponent's cards, which is obviously a good thing to do. But your opponent will also grant themselves a monster. You'll also grant yourself an extra monster with a bunch of the different effects of the archetype. So Curse lets you tribute a monster, summon it. Your opponent also will be getting a monster out of their graveyard, but you do negate their effects. Now, if this card is special summon, you get to target a level 4 lower Abyss and special summon it. Nihil over here lets you add an Abyss spell or trap from your deck to your hand. It's usually going to be this card over here, which during the main phase, you get to tribute a reptile effect monster, then you get to target a card in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your field, but you send it to the graveyard during the end phase. So you can basically dodge certain aspects when your opponent's like, I'm going to target this card and bring it back, and you're just like, nope, this card is now gone, or they're going to banish it for the effect, whatever the case may be. You just take it before that happens. And then also, there's a huge downside with this card. Once per turn, if this face-up card in the spell and trap zone is sent to the graveyard, you send all face-up non-reptile monsters you control to the graveyard. So usually, whatever you get out, unless they're also playing Abyss, you're usually going to lose out on it. So he makes his play to go for Lima over here, and this is a Reptilian and card, and it's important because this is what's required to make one of the most powerful cards in the archetype. Reptilian Hydra lets you, when it's single summon, you destroy everything that has 0, and then you get to draw 1 card for each. So if your opponent happened to have a bunch of 0s, which I'll show you guys how to get really fast in a moment here with a really weird combo, but you can start drawing and popping and, you know, just searching for whatever you need to go for in the archetype. So it's like really good for consistency with the deck. Unfortunately, that gets stopped by the Ash Blossom. It's not going to be able to pop those, but you can also make this card, which adds a little bit more play to the deck, with the Alien Shock Trooper M Frame, which lets you, as a quick effect, you discard 1 monster, and then you get to place a bunch of A counters on your opponent's stuff, and then if it's destroyed by battle by card effect, you get to special summon non-link reptile monsters with different names from a graveyard up to the number of monsters your opponent controls with A counters. This is probably the only way you're going to realistically get out like a bunch of boss monsters instantly from the graveyard. However, this card has to be destroyed battle by card effect. 99% of the time I've seen people make this, they end up investing a lot into this. They get the A counters on and then just gets bounced back. It should have said if this card leaves the field, it would get that effect, which might be too good, but honestly, reptiles have not gotten, you know, any realistically good support. Like even aliens, even though they're technically reptiles too, it's kind of a different archetype. There's not too much synergy by playing alien reptile, like, you know, Abyss. But he's activating this card immediately. He's going to go ahead now snatch steal the Red Dark Dragoon, just in case, you know, if they're attacking or targeting this card, just tribute the card that is going to go away, you know, realistically anyways. But he's going to also stop that. Dark Dragoon will then get that bonus of the attack stat boost, but he also happens to have more plays, even though one of them did get stopped by the Dragoon. And once this card goes away, he loses out on everything. So this is the card where you're able to potentially, if he happen to have monsters, would have been really nice for him. But remember, with the Layer of Darkness, you contribute your opponent's stuff, so that's how you can just instantly get rid of like a lot of boss monsters for you know, yourself to deal with boards. Now this card isn't anything new, so I won't like go over the full effect of it, but it just makes everything become dark. And then if you attribute a card, you're able to tribute your opponent's stuff once per turn, so that's during either player's turn. Now, unfortunately, there is a quick effect, and I'll go over that, and he just GG's right out here because he's just going to lose this anyway. So this first duel over here, the guy just had a follow-up playing. He's just going to have to GG out. But I want to show you guys a variety of duels over here versus a lot of different matchups and interesting interactions that I've noticed with the archetype. So one thing that you'll notice with this deck is it lets your opponent grab something out of their graveyard. I've seen a lot of people try out Shared Ride, which is kind of a cool idea, but like what really makes the archetype good, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen that Spike and Snake's Reign, this card surged up in price. It's like $20 recently because there was a huge buyout. It's just because this card needs to reprint desperately, but it will have a reprint, so I don't know. I feel like people that are, you know, want high rarities, I guess you'll have access to it, but pretty much the deck is very susceptible to Nibiru. Also, there is a play which you'll see over here where, I mean, maybe it was a really big brain play. You'll see it, and it's kind of cool here. But he ends up making for number 97, also going for a Nutmeron Dragon. Unfortunately, it gets stopped by Nibiru. This is a deck where it can definitely explode. But remember, like, losing out on your hand doesn't really mean that much. As long as you have a monster tribute, which can be your opponent's cards if you happen to have Layer of Darkness, but there is some synergy with the deck out of just the graveyard, so you can just grab stuff anyways. But this is another really important card. It's the Invasion of the Abyss. It's a trap card. It's kind of like the only other trap card that they will really use. Usually they go for the one that snatch steals out of the grave by tributing theirs. But it's you get to summon 2 Abyss tokens. It's just really for extra tributing. But if you have 8 or more Abyss monsters with different names in your graveyard, Snake's Reign lets you do this really easy. You just special summon 2 reptile monsters with different names from your graveyard. The whole goal with this can be to try to set up for these boss monster plays. And I'll show you guys all of the bosses in the archetype. So YuGiOh Abhyss is probably one of the most important cards. This card, as a quick effect, you get to send all monsters on the field to the graveyard except for monsters that were special summoned from the graveyard. So pretty much everything that you go for, with the exception of like the Link monster, and technically like the Reptilian Hydra, which you get the effect of it and you usually just tribute it off anyway, so don't worry too much about losing out on your like extra deck monsters, as this archetype doesn't really need it. So this card allows you to go for that, and on top of that, you can go for the Queen of the Abyss. So this card allows you to have the effect where if it's in your graveyard, you can just tribute 2 to summon it. Some of them require 2, some of them... This one's the only one I believe that requires 3 at the moment. But anyways, if a monster is sent from your opponent's hand, deck, to the graveyard, you get to summon a light or dark reptile monster from your graveyard as well. So that can be nice for that effect. And that effect only applies if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard. So you actually kind of try to give your opponent the card out of the grave. It requires you to have like the other Abyss monster that gives them one. Again, it's very unrealistic to get like all these monsters to get the card where you get to pop one and then also get another one. It's really difficult to consistently get all those. But this card effect is very good, as you see over here. The guy just had a straight up scoop right there, because this card on its own, it reminds me of like the Machina card where it's just like, I'm just gonna get rid of like everything. But it doesn't have to like destroy or tribute itself or whatever. It just, as quick effect, just get rid of everything. It seems OP, but if you look at what is available in the game right now, there are, I would say, just a lot more insane plays for certain archetypes. Now, we're seeing a very crazy mix-up over here. He's also got a small little scrap. It's not really a dinosaur engine, it's basically a scrap engine to go ahead and actually extend for even further plays. He unfortunately gets, the guy that's playing Mermels gets stopped. But once again, Nibiru is a fantastic card. And this is one thing you have to pay attention to with this. So Scrap Raptor is just like a easy 1-card combo, which allows him to go ahead and summon again, bringing back the Scrap Raptor, go right into the Halki Fibrax. So this is where some of the plays can get pretty insane. You can go for the Aurora Darn, which will then grant you the access to those tokens, and then you're gonna get rid of the tokens to go ahead and link up, but the Rock's gonna get rid of everything right away. But I want to mention something that's pretty important over here. So we're going to tribute the tokens, so you can still continue on with your plays. The one thing that this archetype does very well is deal with hand traps, because it's kind of hard to gauge when do I hand trap this deck, because I can just tribute their card again and go for another play. So he's gonna have to pass over here, but these cards are just free. Like they'll come back again, no worries. And he still has the Invasion of the Abyss, so that will grant these tokens. He goes ahead and Mooling Glaces, so he's going to get rid of some of the cards. Not that it matters that much, because it doesn't banish them. They just go ahead and discard those cards. But he will also still be able to summon Despot, because that's there's 2 more machine monsters, both players. So he's able to defense up over here. He makes a Power Tool Dragon, adding the Living Fossil, which will grant him the ability to summon Despot 0/1 again. Going for Crocosaur, drawing the card, and then going into the Newer Trish. The Newer Trish isn't really that great for the effect. The reason why, by the way, that a lot of people make this is specifically because it's a 9 and it lets you go using Crocosaur right into VFD, which VFD, as you guys know, that's a pretty good Yu-Gi-Oh card. It says no playing, right? So he's going to attack over this. One thing's important. The extra card they bring out with like Dawn over here, so this lets you bring back another monster. Even though the effects are negated, that card that you summon, it would get banished when it leaves the field. That still applies even under VFD. That's just an important thing. I'm not sure if he actually meant to do that on purpose. Maybe he just didn't want him to get any effects. You're gonna see the Kinda over here, but obviously he's not gonna be able to do anything. He's able to go and bring back another monster, because that's just what the whole archetype does. He goes for M frame over here, so he can try to redistribute those A counters. But again, the problem with this card that you'll see every single time is it just gets bounced back a lot of the times, but you'll see what happens over here with the card. So he's going to actually not get the battle phase. Remember, he's going to Coral Dragon here to activate this effect, which is able to destroy a card. Now, I think it would have been smarter for him to do it. I guess he wanted to keep the card, because he would have still procced this effect if he actually activated this as a quick effect, discarding this to place all the A counters and then getting himself those monsters. But the guy was under the Mooling Glacia. So Mooling Glacia, if you guys remember, it's like you lose the next battle phase. So he just relied on that, and then he was just going to tribute, go right into, because maybe he just wanted that extra reptile just in case. But I think he should have went for the other monsters. That would have been a better choice overall. Now this is important. This guy will be able to go for this effect. So this card specifically is one of the other like boss monsters, if you will, in the archetype. So this card is in your graveyard, tribute monster, summon it, and your opponent gets to add 1 monster from the graveyard to the hand. This is such a bad effect, but again, the whole archetype is supposed to be like your opponent adding stuff, then you get bonuses, but it requires you to have so many Abyss monsters. It's, again, unrealistic, but they get to add whatever they want. This guy actually goes ahead and adds back Nibiru. So he knows he has Nibiru, but he's like, I'm going to continue comboing, which I don't know. Maybe this was the biggest brain IQ play I've ever seen. He goes for number 97, brings out Numron, and then he goes and actually gives him a giant rock over. This is a 10,000 rock. And I'm like, well, like, why would you do that? You know, that didn't, to me, it didn't make sense. I would never have done that, because, you know, they can always go for the heavy infantry and what is it? This is the one that pops, right? So this guy actually loses. So the guy that actually is playing the Abyss actually wins, because he's like, I should have done something. He couldn't, I guess I can't click on this right now, but he didn't have another like play for this, because this has so much attack that he can just attack into this and the guy just GG'd out. So Milk gonna be taking the W over there. But like I said, there is a very important, I think it's in this one. There's a very important play that if you guys want to play Abyss, you need to like know all the ins and outs of this, because there's so many different ways to play this deck. But we're gonna see the Striker Dragon. So like people are even trying like Link. That's not really Link Dragon, although there's a couple cards in here, right? But this is the play that I was like big brain. So he goes ahead, and because you're gonna be tributing, remember, for those card effects to bring out your other monsters, this will proc the effects of the Heretics, which is actually pretty cool. So he makes a Ultima Bish Balkan, because he got the Core Hex over there, which is a really interesting card. It's just, don't worry about it, it doesn't have an effect. It's just a big tuner, a level 8 tuner, and it's got okay stats. But making the Phantasmal Lord Ultimate Bishop. If he didn't summon the Psyframe over here, oh my gosh, it would have been so good. Because you get to put tokens on both players' board that are 0/0. So that means if you go for the Reptilian Hydra play or the Link monster, you can potentially draw an insane amount of cards. So it's just really unlucky matchup against the Psyframe, because he happens to have monsters. But if he didn't, he'd be able to go right into, like, look at, he makes Brachiosaur, goes into this. So he would have potentially, if the guy didn't have it, he could have went for an extra card, I would say, going for all maybe unrealistic, but you can technically go for 5 searches, right? So he's going to activate this effect. He's going to go make it 0 with this, and he's going to search out 4 cards with it. Again, it could have been 5 if he had access to it. Technically, you can go 6, but it's probably a little bit difficult to do. And then if he was to make the synchro, now this guy wasn't playing the synchro. If he was to make the synchro and pop all of those, he would draw 1 card for every single one, which again, that's crazy. Drawing like 4 or 5 cards and searching your deck for whatever you want. But a lot of boards will end on specifically going for this card. It's probably their best option at the end of the day. I was even thinking this deck could be even better by using this effect and then going for a deck Devi or a Eradicator with not this field spell, but the Layer of Darkness. Now, the archetype has its own field spell, which is this card over here. It's if a face-up reptile monster controls destroy a battle by opponent's card effect, you get to target a card your opponent controls, send to the graveyard. And then if this card is destroyed by opponent's card effect, you get to send cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard equal to the number of reptile monsters with different names in your graveyard. That downside of like the other effect of them destroying it, it's not really that much of a downside for them, to be honest, unless they're about to deck out. It's usually just going to help your opponent if they just throw cards in the graveyard. So I don't really like that effect. I wish it got another effect instead. But yeah. Anyways, he still has the YuGiOh Abhyss. This is, again, their boss monsters. Contributing 3 to get it out, and you get a quick effect, send everything. He's going to opt to use the Imperm, but he loses out on that, unfortunately, and he uses the Overlord, so he can't really go off with that. Too bad for him. But Cyframes are still one of those archetypes that are very difficult to deal with because they like to dodge a lot, you know. So he's going to go ahead and take 28. He still has the Droplet over here, and he's going to go ahead and top deck into a Snake's Ring, which is an excellent card if you have you know, access to it. But he's going to go ahead and use that effect to just go for the card and bring back the Curse, which is just a tribute 1, and he's going to try to go for another play, but Overload is just, it's too much for the archetype to deal with, and he's just going to go attack right into it and leave the 1800 in attack position. But he still has a Droplet over here, but no other card to discard, so he's just going to lose out on that monster as well. And now with no monsters left on field, it's going to be a little bit of a mini smackdown over here. Let's go for the Devotee, grab himself some extra tokens. Link Karibo going to bring itself onto the board, and he goes into the Lambda. And he's going to attack for 17, pass on them. He's going to top decks a trade-in. Fortunately, that's not going to be too good right here with the Droplet. But he's going to now go to battle phase, attack for the 1700, attack for the 300. 1500 life points is going to be making a comeback. He's got one more turn. He's going to be able to at least try to go for the effect, but Ash Blossom says no to that. But a lot of the things do have the ability to reoccur. It's kind of difficult to gauge when you actually need to go for some of your plays in this archetype in terms of like when to negate. He actually has to drop it over there, otherwise GG's. So he top decks into Nihil. He's going to set it because it's got 2,000 defense points, but Overload is a very good card once something you know, is going to be top decking, you know, at the end of the day. But like I said, we got a lot more plays for you guys. I just acquired a lot of what I consider a lot of variety of different play styles and different things that people can do. Different tech choices that I've seen. This one's going to be Invoked Abhyss versus another Abyss variant. I think other great cards that I wanted to highlight here. Dang, this video is way longer than necessary now. But anyways, Reasoning is an excellent card in the archetype as well, just because there's so many different levels that you can just bring out whatever, depending on what build that you're playing as well. But again, Layer of Darkness I think is definitely one of the best cards because it deals with boards, you know, turn 1. And again, I think that it's difficult to decide on when you need to negate this. But he's got the boss monster, he's got Layer of Darkness, he's also got the Emptiness of the Abyss, which lets you distribute a reptile effect monster. Wish this also converted them to reptile, then you contribute that as well. I guess you can DNA change everything, but that's like unrealistic, right? The guy goes for Reasoning. Unfortunately, he hits the Morphing Jar, which I'm not sure how I feel with this card in the deck. It's just because a lot of times you just go through all your cards in your hand immediately, and Morphing Jar would. You don't always need your normal summons. You can just set that, get a fresh new hand, but I just feel like giving your opponent like a fresh hand too is not always the most ideal thing. But anyways, he goes for a Purgatrio. Purgatrio obviously can attack over a lot of different things, which is good for them. He's also got a Strike and another Evasion of the Abyss, but he's going to bring back some extra monsters. And remember, that Layer of Darkness is going to grant him a bunch of tokens. Main phase 2 is going to go convert that to 0, and then search out whatever he needs. He's going to go for the Null. He's going to go get basically another Foolish over here, so you can send another dark reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. And if you control none, it's if you control no monsters, or you control an Abyss. It's kind of like a Treeborn Frog, it just comes back all the dang time. But it does get banished when it leaves the field, but you can reset that card. So he goes for Chaos Space. So there's a white and black dragon variant in this one by player and this guy Flame DXD with the reasoning. I think reasoning should be in the deck though. Like I think it's overall a pretty good card, because if not, you're just sending some stuff to the grave anyways, and that's just plus for you. And then now we're gonna see the Hydra. There's no like back row that gets really a nice effect. Unfortunately, that gets stopped. If he was able to make more things have 0, again, I feel like this combo with the ultimate token, that card is only good turn 1, but he goes ahead and just says GG at this point. But he's got also the Darkest Diablos over here, so that can be okay considering your opponent can't tribute this card. Doesn't really matter. But if it's just a dark monster you control is tributed, you can just special summon it. So there's a little bit more play with just playing a little bit more aggressive with this. As remember with the Og, you're gonna be able to completely pop the entirety of the board. But I wanted to also show off this one with Zoo. This was another interesting matchup over here. So as far as the archetype goes, I don't feel like there's an insanely strong turn 1 play. It requires you to have so many dang monsters in the graveyard and still have the Og to be summoned. So you'd have to have basically 9, and then you could get the one where you can summon 2. And then I've seen few people again do Shared Ride, but I just Shared Ride could be an okay side deck card. There's also another card I wanted to mention that I think only this guy was playing, which is Viper's Rebirth. It just, if all monsters you control or if all of them in your graveyard are reptile, you just select a non-tuner monster in your graveyard and special summon it, and it's destroyed the face. It's just another extender over here. Wait, you know what? This was the wrong one. We wanted to show off this one. Okay, so that one was actually an example of what the deck can do turn 1. And you could see it wasn't very strong in the play department. But this one up over here is going to be a match with Zoo, and I really wanted to highlight this one because it ran Disparity. In fact, a lot of them were running Disparity, which opens up the door for some discussion. So obviously the deck needs Snake's Reign to open up what I would consider optimally, because you really want to be able to get this card. I think this is one of the most important cards in the whole archetype. Unfortunately, gets stopped by Ash Blossom, but the ultimate, the one that gives you all the token, I like that play more than anything. The guy does also summon the F0 over here. So you do have to watch out for what you're giving your opponent. And again, with that Mermail-like duel where he actually gave him the card, but he won because of the Nibiru, maybe he's the smartest Yu-Gi-Oh player and he's like, this guy's ran out of resources, which, you know, that can be a thing where like, you're like, my opponent doesn't have anything. If he Nibiru's me, I have a token, he cannot get over it if with like everything in his deck. I remember back in the day, some decks couldn't get over, what was that? The one that kept on getting the monster that gets stronger every time he did like burn damage, or it can be destroyed by battle. Like the only out was like, at the time, the easiest out was like Compulse to get rid of that card. It was that Synchro monster. But yeah, anyways, there are some times where like, you know, you do realize that a deck just simply doesn't have an out to something. But this one over here, he's making use of King of Feral Imps, which is something I kind of wanted to briefly talk about. Went back to the duel that you guys just saw turn 1. That one was actually supposed to be for the discussion of like the deck in its pure state. I don't really feel like has a great turn 1, as you guys saw. I feel like all it can do turn 1 is go for Og, and then if you, like, I'm talking about in its pure own archetype, nothing like no imperms, no other like deck devies, Layer of Darkness. In its own archetype, you could only really go for that play that he made. I actually want to highlight it again because I thought it was this one that was going to be shown off, but he goes for a Zeus, which again is a really, really powerful card in Zoo variants. Obviously, you're going to have to deal with this card again and again and again, but like sending them off the graveyard doesn't hurt you. Most of them you can get back as long as you have like one other monster to summon. You'll be a-okay. But I think this deck, it still has a lot of problems and it has a ways to go before I would consider it to be top tier, but I don't think it's a bad deck at all. Like I said, the play that I liked the most was probably where you got the bunch of tokens and you can potentially search out for whatever you need and then draw a bunch with the Synchro monster to pop all the zeros. I think that's probably one of the best openers that can do like on its like own reptile archetype. As you can really only go for sometimes you will be locked out, especially if you play your Pot of Disparities, which yeah, that's you know, it's a pretty good card because Snake's Reign is what I would consider to be like almost required to get within a few turns if you don't happen to have, like, unless you're playing like a light sworn variant, but this going to be able to negate one effect. But again, sometimes it's kind of hard to determine what you're going to negate. I think the deck really needs Layer of Darkness. Like, if you just slap that Layer of Darkness on and then distributed him, he would be good to go. But he gets Veiler. The guy just has too many resources at this point, because you basically invest everything, which this deck would definitely lose to Macrocosmos as well. Not that, like, you know, that we've seen any matchups against it, but I wanted to highlight this one because I wanted to show off, like, how good this guy opened. Like, I would consider this a really fantastic hand, going for Snake's Rain, being able to dump all of them, and on top of that, being able to summon Light Serpent. But look at this play, what you can do in the pure version of the archetype. That's why I like the Ultimea card, because you could, again, draw 4, search 4 after this play, which I think would be an excellent addition to the deck. But he's going to now use that Viper's Rebirth. And King of the Feral Imps is still like a great card. You can see he's going for it once again just to search out and get everything set up for the graveyard for, again, potentially getting those 8 cards in. But he even had a Reborn, and look at this, like, turn 1 board. Like, I just think it's very weak. Like, this, technically you can search out this card also. So this one, he's going to be able to get a card out of his opponent's graveyard. He has this over here where if your opponent adds a card from their hand, except during the draw phase, you get to send 1 random card from the hand to the graveyard. So, like, you can maybe RNG and get a monster, and then special summon it, and then tribute your own monster. I just feel like that on its own is not really that powerful. But being able to add a light or deck reptile from the deck to the hand, it's like it's basically a searcher, right? So if all those go well, remember, if your opponent monsters your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, then you can get that effect. So you just need too many things to go right. And then with Queen, you're able to go, if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, you get to send 1 card your opponent controls to the graveyard. So again, it's to make it so you don't really go minus when some of these things happen, and then you'd have this over here to follow up. And even if you had the Og, that's like actually like what I consider very weak disruption, as it requires just too many things to go right, and he got hit with a lightning storm, and then he just was like, I'm good. So again, I think the deck still has a lot of problems. Dealing with Lightning Storm can definitely be a thing if you play like a bunch of traps. I think the way to be successful for this deck, and we'll get into it when I talk about the deck profile, because this video is like way too long anyways, but I want to show you guys a variety of the deck, winning and losing and all that stuff. But let me go into the deck profile, and I'll just talk a little bit more about the archetype. So we have a lot of different versions. So this one's courtesy of Sore Loser, which was the last one that you guys just saw. Nothing too special with it. He was running Evil Dragon Anata, which is like the only guy that I've seen play it. But it cannot be a special summon. It's just you remove all of your reptiles, and it gains attack and defense equal to the number of removed times 600. So if you really want to go for some big OTK plays, you get 6 of them. It's like Red Maju, Daiza, one-shotting, and especially if you can utilize it with the YuGiOh Abhyss. But I think what this deck would actually really lose to, honestly, is Crow. Right now, Tri-Brigades are like main decking triple Crows, so that's one thing that it could lose to. By the way, I'll include all the deck profiles via Discord. I'm just going to go over these like kind of fast. I'm just going to mouse over them and kind of talk a little bit about other things that I didn't get to mention. A lot of people playing Yami Mori over here. So this card lets you activate it, you target a reptile you control, 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, so you can destroy the monster you have and then change that opponent's monster to 0 attack. I don't really like this card that much, but it does offer another utility with Snake's Rain with that effect. And then on top of that, you can reset this card if you want to, where you're able to take the banished cards and put it back in your graveyard with the other Abyss effect. But that's just that card. This card's just a tuner at the end of the day. It's just an easy summon. All of them reptiles, minimum 1, you special summon it. And then you can also target a face monster opponent controls. You take the damage equal to its attack, and then you get to make it 0, which is kind of nice. But nothing too special with this variant that I have not mentioned already, but this is what this one was running in the extra deck. Now moving on to the other variant over, this is the Invoked, which he's also playing Jar. I think Reasoning is just the card I kind of wanted to mention and show off right there. There's nothing too special. So it's playing some Solemn Strikes, but I'm just going to go over these relatively quick so you guys have a decent amount of variety. Now, this was the large 60 card variant over here. This one actually ran Alien Brain. So when a reptile monster control is destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster into the graveyard, you get to take control of the opponent's monster, and it becomes reptile type. So there's a little bit of play with this card as well. I feel like this card is just way too slow, honestly. There's also like their own version of Icarus attack. So you target 1 face of reptile you control and 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy all 3 targets. Again, it's just Icarus attack for them. this guy was just trying out other things, and I like it when people try out other things. I think that the Striker Dragon, along with the Black and White Dragon, are pretty cool cards as well. I think what this deck really needs to be successful is honestly more hand traps and being able to Layer of Darkness, maybe tributing one of your opponent's cards. Because if you can like have the Og, which is their boss monster, right? Like I think one is enough for this. But again, if you're playing against Tri Brigade, they're just gonna hit it with Crow all day. But if you can turn one, make this, and then have maybe a hand trap, like just this, a hand trap and Layer of Darkness, and you should be able to follow up the next turn with bringing out your other monsters and using them as stepping stones to maybe bring back this guy if he goes away. But I think Layer of Darkness is really the key to making this deck successful. And then also another thing, just so your stuff is protected a little bit more, I honestly think the Eradicator, Eradicator Epidemic, Deck Devi, both of those things are what I would consider excellent options, because not only can you tribute your opponent's stuff with Layer of Darkness, but hey, all your monsters just are automatically converted to dark anyways with Layer of Darkness. But there are also other monsters that do happen to meet the requirements, because it's what, 2,500 or more. So I think that would be an excellent option, so your opponent can't really like get around too much with their plays. It really limits them on what they can do, as I think these cards are just great in general overall, as you can consistently get out a bunch of these cards with decent amount of attack. The other one, Deck Devi, is I believe 2,000, and that's so easy in this deck. Deck Devastation is 2,000 or more, and just tribute, where's it, this one? Yes, Dusk. But remember, with this card, your opponent does get to add that monster, but again, I've seen people mess around with other options with that. But you're gonna know exactly what they're adding, so at least you have that looking forward to. But yeah, you can go for some of those plays. This guy maxed out on 3 copies. I probably would not play 3 copies. I think 1 is okay, but I don't know if I'd even like consider it. I don't really like the field spell honestly that much. That's just my personal take on it. But you guys can let me know how you feel about it. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna mouse over these relatively quick. This card happens to be Reptiles, so it does work kind of well with the archetype. There's also Crossout Designator, although I feel like I wouldn't mind playing, Veilers and Ash Blossoms in the deck. But I feel like what's more successful for the deck, I mean, obviously going for those plays when you go for this and it gets negated, it definitely does hurt, or when you go for the Synchro, it hurts. So if you're playing the build where you want to go for turn 1 insane ultimate Bish Balkan plays, like I said before, this guy didn't even play the Reptilian Synchro monster. This combo over here is insane. It is legitimately, you can't actually go for 5 tokens because you need the Reptilian and so you basically go for 4 on both boards, right? You have 4 on both boards, and then you go right into because this only requires a Reptilian tuner, right? So you need to summon this. Okay, important thing I need to explain first. You need to at some point go for, where's the Reptilian end? Let me just, it's this one over here, I believe. Yeah, this is the level 2 one. So make sure you do this first because all of them have to be reptile monsters. So make sure you go for this at some point before going for this part of the play, and then you can go get your 4, and then you use the tokens plus this, and then you go and make this that's 6, and then yeah, quick maths. There you go. And then the idea is to draw 4 cards and search out for 4 cards. So that's one thing you can do. I really wish the whole archetype had a 1 hand trap too. Anyways, like I said, sorry. I make this video is so long, but there's just so much to cover in this whole archetype. As this one had a lot of different plays. It kept on making like number 7. You can actually go for this as well, as most of the cards are free anyways. Like you just reoccur, get them back. But I feel like the deck needs more disruptions in order for it to be viable, because most of the things you kind of go like neutral with. Like your opponent gets a card and then you get a card, but like you're just using your cards to make the other cards, which give you like 1 disruption. I feel like the deck definitely needs a lot more. Anyways, you guys can let me know what you think it needs. I think it needs a reptile that you can, obviously you can search out like a lot of stuff in the archetype, which is quite good, but I think they need to have 1 card be like some type of a hand trap, some type of disruption that's a reptile that you can discard and it gets the effect or something like that. But that's, I feel like, what the deck needs. But you guys can let me know your thoughts down below. But anyways, that's gonna go wrap up things. Hope you guys enjoyed this super long video. If you did, drop a like on it. If you're new here and want to see more of this in the future, hit subscribe, turn the bell, and you'll definitely see more very soon. But take care, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video, and I'm out. Peace.